Direct News TV. December 30, 2023. Israel-Hamas war live, death toll climbs as Israel ramps up attacks in Gaza. At least 165 Palestinians have been killed and 250 injured in the last 24 hours, according to Gaza's health ministry. Israeli forces have detained at least 14 people in the occupied West Bank in overnight raids, the Palestinian Prisoners Society said in a statement. Israelis call for captive release in latest protests. Protesters have gathered in Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem, in the latest effort to heap pressure on Israel's government to do more to secure the release of captives. At least 129 captives remain held in Gaza. The protests come a day after mediators signaled Hamas and Israel were open to renewing stalled negotiations on the releases. Justice must be served and the genocide must stop, Palestinian official. The Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Husam Zomlet, hailed South Africa's decision to launch a case against Israel in the International Court of Justice, accusing it of carrying out genocidal acts in the Gaza Strip. Biden admin, keeping the American public in the dark on Israeli weapons, U.S. Senator Tim Kaine, a Democratic senator and former vice presidential candidate, condemned the Biden administration's emergency approval of a potential weapons sale to Israel. The move allows the Biden administration to bypass congressional approval on the potential $147 million sale of M107 155mm projectiles and related equipment. It comes after the administration used a similar maneuver to bypass congressional approval for a separate weapons sale earlier in the month. Why should the admin bypass Congress on arms sales to any nation? Kaine wrote. Bypassing Congress equals keeping the American public in the dark. Support for Israel remains widespread within the U.S. legislature, but a handful of legislators, including Kaine, have increasingly called for more oversight on U.S. weapons transfers. Captive Israeli soldier killed in Gaza by Israeli air raid. An Israeli soldier being held captive in Gaza has been killed in an Israeli air raid that also wounded some of his captors, the armed wing of the Palestinian Liberation Front says. In an audio speech broadcast by Al Arabi Television, a spokesperson for the Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades said the air raid took place following a failed attempt by Israeli commandos to free the soldier. The spokesperson gave no details of when the soldier had been taken captive, or where he was being held in Gaza. 40% of Palestinians in Gaza at risk of famine, UNRWA. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which caters to the needs of Palestinian refugees, says, every day is a struggle for survival, finding food and water. Israel says 2 more soldiers killed in Gaza fighting. The military says Major Konstantin Sushko was killed in southern Gaza and Captain Harel Idat died after being wounded in Gaza last week. At least 170 Israeli soldiers have been killed since Israel began its major ground operations in Gaza at the end of October. At least 11 of those soldiers were killed in northern Israel. Israel wants Palestinians dead or displaced, PA. The Palestinian Authority, PA, Foreign Ministry says Israel's governing coalition is treating Palestinians as an enemy who must be killed or displaced. The ministry slammed the Israeli war on Gaza as genocide. It said Israeli forces are rampaging through the occupied West Bank, shooting to kill, confiscating land, and expelling Palestinians from their homes. There were several Israeli air raids mainly on the town of Bint Jbeil. For the second time in 48 hours, an attack targeted a house in the center of the town. According to reports, there are no casualties. Another town closer to the border of Israel was also hit by an Israeli attack in a residential area. This raises the risk of civilian casualties daily. We also understand moments ago there was an Israeli drone attack on a car in the town of Yaroun. This comes also as Hezbollah claimed responsibility for 3 attacks on Israeli military bases on the border. Some attacks went without anyone claiming responsibility, including launching rockets towards the Israeli town of Kiryat Shmona, 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles, from the border. 100,000 people moved into Rafah in last few days, UN. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimates at least 100,000 people have moved into Rafah, the city located in the far south of the Gaza Strip, over the last few days. This took place as Israeli shelling and air raids intensified in and around Khan Yunis, Gaza's second-largest city, and elsewhere in the south. Monitor says 19 fighters killed in Syria attacks. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says 19 pro-Iranian fighters, including 4 Syrians, and 6 Iraqis, were killed and more than 18 were wounded in at least 9 airstrikes overnight near the Iraqi border. The bombardment was likely launched by Israel, the Monitor said. The Syrian Defense Ministry says Israel struck the city of Aleppo in separate attacks on Saturday. End the occupation, solution is not just more aid, NGO. The CEO of ANRA, the American Near East Refugee Aid, says the war in Gaza does not just require more work to get aid in but more importantly a ceasefire and end of Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. ANRA is an NGO that helps refugees and vulnerable communities in Palestine, Lebanon and Jordan. Israel says struck Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon. Israel's military says it struck 3 terrorist squads in southern Lebanon as well as Hezbollah's operational infrastructure. Hezbollah claimed 8 attacks on Israel on Saturday as cross-border fighting continues. The attacks follow a series of attacks by Hezbollah on Israeli posts close to the border. The border area between Lebanon and Israel has seen escalating exchanges of fire since the Israeli-Gaza war began on October 7. The recent rise in violence between Israel and Hezbollah has been largely confined to the border area, although Israel has conducted limited air raids deeper into Lebanese territory. Israel targets Syria's Aleppo with air raids. Israeli warplanes targeted sites in the northeastern Syrian city of Aleppo, according to the Syrian Defense Ministry. Israel carried out an aerial aggression from the direction of the Mediterranean Sea, west of Latakia, targeting several points south of the city of Aleppo, a statement said. The Israeli military did not immediately confirm the attack. Last week, an Israeli air raid outside the Syrian capital Damascus killed a senior advisor in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. The attacks come amid fears Israel's war on Gaza could expand into a wider regional conflict, pulling in Iran-backed groups such as Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Qassam targets Israeli soldiers and military vehicles. Hamas's armed wing says its fighters targeted 2 Israeli military jeeps and the soldiers manning the vehicles in Sheikh Ajlan neighborhood in southern Gaza City. A group of soldiers and military vehicles with mortar shells east of the town of Qusayh in the southern Gaza Strip. 8 Israeli tanks with Yasin 105 shells in the Gaza Old City districts of Tufa and Derich. A group of soldiers and military vehicles with mortar shells east of Rafah, in the southern Gaza Strip. UN Special Rapporteur lauded South Africa for genocide step. Francesca Albanese has commended the government of South Africa for asking the International Court of Justice to investigate Israel for genocide. I encourage other member states to make meaningful submissions and contribute to save lives, she said in a post on X. The survival of an entire people is on the line. UNRWA Gaza chief, people are desperate for food. Thomas White posted footage showing people in Gaza City trying to access food from a truck carrying humanitarian aid. He said people are hungry and more supplies are needed to enter the besieged enclave regularly. Only 13 out of 36 Gaza hospitals are partially functional, WHO. The World Health Organization says 9 hospitals in the south and 4 in the north of the besieged coastal enclave are operational. The 4 partially functional hospitals in the north have a shortage of medical staff, including specialized surgeons, neurosurgeons, and intensive care staff, as well as a lack of medical supplies, such as anesthesia, antibiotics, and pain relief medicine. The 9 partially functional hospitals in the south are operating at 3 times their capacity while facing critical shortages of basic supplies and fuel. According to Gaza's health ministry, occupancy rates are reaching 206% in inpatient departments and 250% in intensive care units. 307 Palestinians killed in occupied West Bank since October 7, UN. The death toll in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, includes 79 children, the UN agency OCHA says. Of the dead, 298 were killed by Israeli forces, 8 by Israeli settlers, and another either by forces or settlers, which is in the process of being verified. This death toll represents more than 60% of all Palestinians killed in the West Bank in 2023. With a total of 506 Palestinians killed in the West Bank, 2023 is the deadliest year for Palestinians in the occupied territory since OCHA began recording casualties in 2005. 352 schools damaged across the Gaza Strip. Several UN agencies and education-focused NGOs say the damage affected 400,700 students, more than half, 52%, of whom are girls. 3 governorates, Gaza, Khan Yunis and North Gaza, are highly affected, accounting for 74% of the total damage. About 90% of school buildings are being used as shelters by internally displaced people, the group said. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.